Hello, I'm Mark Archibald from First Baptist Church. Joining me also from First Baptist is Barbie Patterson, and our guests today are Bruno and Kathleen Soucy. Bruno and Kathleen, where are we talking to you from today?
Well, we currently live in San Lucas in Guatemala, which is about 20 kilometers outside of Guatemala City, the capital.
All right. And so how did you come to end up in Guatemala?
Well, you know, when you start off on this journey of stepping out out of your normal kind of regular work life and into full-time mission work, which we did back in 2006, when we started working with Canadian Baptist Ministries, you know, you step into a lot of things you don't know are going to happen. So it was kind of an exciting journey for us to begin this time in East Africa. Bruno is a Francophone from Quebec, and because we had French, we went to Rwanda to help our partner there, and we had a very deep but narrow experience in the small country of Rwanda. So that's where we spent our first 7 years. And then at that time, I think we were looking at, when we first sort of had this call to missions, we had been investigating what work CBM was involved in Latin America. And so at that time, we weren't necessarily ready to leave Rwanda or anything like that, but we just thought we would start that conversation with CBM leaders about, you know, what's happening in Central America and Latin America in general, and is there, you know, could there be a need for people like us down the road? And we started to pray about that. And then of course, the timing brought us to become team leaders for Latin America, which is a different role that we had. We had previously been very closely connected to the nuts and bolts of partnership, walking alongside very deeply, being out in the field, those types of things, into this leadership role. And then we started in Bolivia because that is where CBM has had its largest and next to India, the longest serving partnership. And so we spent the first 4 years in our time in Latin America and Bolivia with our colleagues there. And then the move towards Central America, where we've been now for 2 years, which is hard to say because we've had one of those years now being the pandemic, so it doesn't feel like 2 years. And coming to this part of Latin America was really to help develop new partnerships for CBM. And as you know, we work through partnerships that are connecting us to local church work, and we work at the denominational level and have institutional partners. Those which you know very dearly are in Cuba. The Dominican Republic has also been new since we've been here, and as well as those partnerships in Guatemala and El Salvador. So for us, that's basically how we've ended up where we are. And it's been an exciting journey for sure, that how God has led us.
That's great.
Can I ask, what would be a project currently giving you the most joy and affirming your call to be there in Guatemala? And even if there are challenges, just share with us something that is affirming your assignment there in Guatemala.
A lot of our work is with newer partners, and we have this idea that integral mission means that the local church is touching their community. And I think probably not unlike a lot of our Canadian churches, the idea that the church is a refuge, that's a very, very strong philosophy here in many of the churches. So in other words, we don't want to be too close to the world because we get touched by sin and people who aren't like us. So that's a big part of our work, is actually to get the church to engage their community, because we think that if you're going to transform communities, the best way to do it is through the local church. And that local church cannot have impact if they're not in the community. So in a sense, it could be, I'm not sure if there's any silver linings from COVID, but COVID provoked a lot of churches. They were facing desperate people in their communities in a way that they hadn't noticed before. And so almost all of the churches that we are involved with did food relief things. Some of them, their churches served as the distribution centers for different activities they were doing. And so probably because of COVID, a lot of the churches that we had been working with that were sort of resisting the idea of getting into the community, COVID forced them there. And now they're seeing, wow, like if we're going to impact our communities for the gospel, we need to be out there. And so I'd say that's one of the things that gives us joy. I think your church and others in Canada participated in raising some funding specifically for COVID relief. So no huge campaigns with most of our partners, but small amounts of money that sort of encourage the church to use their own resources and use some external resources to have impact. And there's different ways of keeping stats, but tens of thousands of people have been touched by food relief and now have a connection to the local church and that local church as well. I think you talk about COVID, will we go back to normal, whatever normal was? And I think one of the things that probably will not go back to normal is this idea that the church is a closed kind of club. So we're really thankful that we've been able to be participants in that and see that move along. And in fact, move along some of the things we wanted to see happen in a way that it wasn't our doing, but it's moving in the right direction. And we're really looking forward to continuing that momentum and helping our churches to really impact the communities.
Yeah, that's excellent to hear how that's continued on. I think that's a trend that the church is seeing around the world. When it seems like, I think we think of so much of church as you come to church on Sunday and you worship together. That's what you do. That's what churches are for. And I think we've seen, and other churches have seen, that there's been all kinds of opportunities to be further involved in the community. And that ministry hasn't stopped. It's actually thrived in some ways, and it's forced us into places that maybe we didn't think we had the time for before or the resources for. It's forced us into places where we didn't think we would be. And all of a sudden we look around and we're like, oh, well, this is where we were supposed to be all along. So that's encouraging to hear that trend is going on there as well. So in terms of the church in Latin America and the Caribbean, what would be some way that our church would be able to pray for yours? What's something that we should keep in mind in prayer at this time?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've been working through the prayer course at CBM, and I'm reminded as I answer this question, maybe it's good to pray for incremental things. It's not like for the world to change tomorrow, but what can we pray that's really specific? And so, but I still want to go for that big one. And really, I think a big item for prayer is just that whole piece around justice as far as this vaccine rollout goes. Because very practically, you've already heard from Colleen about the lack of food access, and really this access to a reliable vaccine is something that's going to be a huge issue for our southern partners. And it is a huge issue. We don't even hear about what the plans are, or, what, when, where, and who. There's no discussion about that. So I think that we know that those countries that have, and the ones that don't. And so how can we be praying for our government leaders, the people involved, and people at our level that have an opportunity to be able to speak into things. Just pray that these countries that desperately need this vaccine will get it. And so that's one area for prayer. And I think with respect to the times we're in, we have such respect for the partner leaders that we are working with who are dealing with the realities of this pandemic that's going to continue on in a very different way here, I think, than it is for our northern friends, certainly for this year again. So they're dealing with those realities, but they're also really focused on the future. They're focused on how do we best train our leaders, and how do we continue on this road of, being the hands and feet of Jesus. So I think praying for these leaders, for their physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And I think that's a area.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I know if people want to find out about Latin America and the Caribbean and our work there, I know they can go to cbmin.org, and that will give all kinds of information about the different projects that we have going on there and throughout the world through Canadian Baptist Ministries. So Bruno and Kathleen, we're very, very grateful for your time with us today. So thank you for taking this time with us to
Thank you.
share your heart for ministry and share what's going on in the regions that you serve.
And we want to thank the church as well for their support and all they do, and the love that you have for our Caribbean partners. And yes, it just really makes the work. We are the extension of the church in Canada, I believe. And so we just want to thank you for your commitment there.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.